We're going in the order that people appeared here. So, Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Assistant Secretary, for coming and appearing for us. You know, ICE is kind of in the middle of a lot of the discussion about the President's new policies, and I had the opportunity to look over your biography, and I take it you were the U.S. Attorney in Texas. And I guess your role at that time really was to help enforce law. Is that right? Not policy. Is that?
To enforce the law.
Law, not policy, but law. And there's a critical distinction that is playing out in, Judge Hannon's opinion about what's going on, because, the distinction is whether or not the President policy, as implemented, effectively have replaced the law, which the President can't do. I mean, I hope we all should agree the President can't replace the law. And your testimony on page 3 says, and correctly, that ICE is charged with enforcing and or administering the nation's immigration laws. Now I'm going to read you a very disturbing transcript of the President's immigration town hall meeting from February 25th, where he addresses the role of ICE. He says, quote, "We are now implementing a new prioritization." And he's obviously referring to the prioritization that it's actually laid out on the ICE website with regards to, I guess, Mr. Johnson's memoranda. He says there are going to be some jurisdictions, and there may be individual ICE officials or Border Patrol who aren't paying attention to our new directives. It doesn't say the law, he says the new directives. But they're going to be answerable to the head of the Department of Homeland Security because he's been very clear about what our priorities should be. A few moments later, and I've been in the military, so I understand what he's talking about. The President says, look, the bottom line is that if somebody's working for ICE and there is a policy and they don't follow the policy, there are going to be consequences to it. Goes on to say, in the U.S. military, when you get an order, you're expected to follow it. I understand. I was in the military, and I understand what getting an order is. It doesn't mean that everybody follows the order. If they don't, they've got a problem. And the same thing is going to be true with respect to the policies that we're putting forward. Now, I read this to be that the President has directed ICE to follow policy instead of law. Now, I've got to ask you, is your interpretation different? I mean, the President, I understood, I was in the military, I knew what the consequence was if I didn't follow an order. It wasn't pleasant. I can't even imagine a person working for ICE reading this thinking, I have to follow the policy. I don't have discretion. There's no prioritization going to go on within these priorities. My discretion is removed. I have to follow that policy under the threat of the commander-in-chief in the case of the military or the head of the executive branch in the case of DHS, of saying if they don't, they've got a problem. Now, Madam Secretary, I've got to ask you, is this the way ICE runs? Is ICE's purpose is to enforce policy, not law?
It's to enforce the law. And I will tell you that in the Secretary's November 20th memo, he made it very clear that these are priorities, but that every individual who comes before Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials for whom we're making a decision, whether to apprehend, arrest, set bonds, whatever, is to be determined on a case-by-case basis. And there's a sentence here that people miss this all the time, and I'm not exactly sure why. There's a sentence very clearly. These are the cards that our officers carry with them, so they have a handy-dandy little reference to keep in mind what the priorities are. Sir? Yes, have been since we completed the training in early January on these new priorities, which is when the executive actions went into effect. But it says here, if you encounter a priority alien who you believe is not a threat to national security, border security, or public safety, or believe that a non-priority alien's removal would serve as an important federal interest, you should discuss this matter with your supervisor. I personally met with every chief, we call them our lawyers out there, chief counsels in all the districts by video, along with the directors, the field office directors, and I said, these are priorities. I made very clear this exercise of judgment on a case-by-case analysis. Even if this person does not meet a priority, and you believe or have reason to believe that person still presents a public safety threat, it is your responsibility, and this is what we're here for, is to ensure that that person is taken into account, and then you meet with your supervisor to discuss it. It also says the opposite, and that is, if they're on here, but you don't consider them a public safety threat. It's a 72-year-old man who committed a crime in his teens and is now before you and has never had another criminal record before that, but the felony falls within the priorities. You have the ability to exercise your discretion on it. You know, there's a case in the Fifth Circuit that I followed closely myself, which is the Crane case, that challenged the ability of this kind of discretion, and the court, at least at the Fifth Circuit level, has gone with us. I'm sure that's still in litigation. We'll see how it turns out. But again, the reason that this is not replacing the law is because this essentially memorializes what I did every day as an assistant United States attorney and as the U.S. attorney, and that is exercise my discretion because I could not enforce, with our skimpy little budget, 3,000 plus laws that...
Sure. No, and I appreciate that, and I think that would be the right thing. The Crane case, I take it, is the one that was ruled on just a week ago, dismissed the lawsuit?
Yes.
That was overstanding, though. That wasn't over an issue of whether or not. Am I correct?
I think you're precisely. I think you're,
right.
You're more precise than I was. But
correct. So legal standing, really. I mean, we know that has nothing to do with the basis of whether or not the president's action was legal. But these plaintiffs did not have the ability to have their case heard in court because of legal standing. So let's just dispense with this supporting the president's policy. So did the president get it wrong? Because I'm going to read it again. This is the President of the United States. This is the person in charge of the executive branch said, if an individual ICE official isn't paying attention to our new directives, they're going to be answerable to the head of DHS because he's been very clear about what our priorities should be.
The November 20th memo, and he was.
Right, a memo. So the president wasn't saying that we're going to ask ICE to enforce the law. It's to enforce the November 24th memo. Is that right? Basically.
Well, Congressman, you know, the law some of them can be very lengthy. I mean, I know this personally. Reading them can give you a headache. But the law is just that. It's not intended to cover how you go about your business. I had, as the United States Attorney, I served in the Attorney General's Advisory Committee. We had to help United States attorneys flesh out what the law was through policies from the Attorney General. You flesh out what the law is, and you try to abide by congressional
Sure, Madam Assistant Secretary, and I'm just going to, because I've overspent my time here, but I'm just going to ask you about that point. The fact of the matter is, the level 3 priority, and this is from your, this is from your testimony, the third level of priority are people who have actually had a final order of removal against them. So someone made a legal finding that these individuals are not here legally. Am I correct that they have violated the law and they're not here legally?
That's an initial, but all of these things can be appealed. But yes, that's the initial finding.
Let's be honest. What the president has said, we have individuals with legal findings against them, have clearly been found to violate the law, and the new directive says we're going to, instead of enforcing that law, which would result in their deportation, we're going to follow a directive or a policy. Look, I'm a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. But to someone observing this says, we've already made a legal finding, and the new memorandum says, we're not going to follow the law, we're going to follow a policy or directive. And I have to tell you, as a member of the legislative branch, I take that very seriously. When the executive branch says, We have let the system run, we've made a legal finding, and now we're going to disregard the law. We're going to follow an executive branch policy or directive. And I will tell you, that was a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary, and I yield back.